Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. If this is your first time here, I'm Anna, a clinical psychology doctoral candidate. This channel is all about providing you with real life applications to psychology, so if that is something you would like to see more of, make sure to hit like and subscribe. Today we're talking about cognitive distortions or cognitive errors or cognitive biases. They're all kind of under the same umbrella. What they all refer to is basically types of thoughts or beliefs that keep you from seeing reality for what it is and make you more scared, negative, bitter, selfish, hopeless, etc. So the following 10 cognitive distortions are some of the human mind's greatest weaknesses, and we all do them to some extent, but when they become very prevalent, it can become a real problem for our mental health. So my Candy in the background, I actually got some bad news that she's gonna need surgery for a tumor today, so sorry if I'm not as chipper as usual. And like I was saying, don't worry if you relate to many of these distortions, because like I said, it's a very human weakness to have. Our brains unfortunately have not yet adapted to the point where we can transcend these biases. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about these 10 distortions and also give you some challenges to break free from them. But first, let's talk about this month's fundraiser. The last fundraiser, which was for Project Hope, which helps places like Ukraine, raised double the goal that we set out to accomplish. So I am so eternally grateful for that. Thank you all so much for your contributions. Today's fundraiser is for Trans Lifeline, which is a peer support and crisis hotline 501 nonprofit organization that serves transgender individuals by offering phone support through a crisis line. It's the first hotline crisis to exist specifically for transgender people in the US and Canada. It's also the only hotline where operators are all transgender themselves. This is an important cause to me because I'm really concerned about things happening in Texas, where, I don't know if you've heard, but they passed a law claiming that parents of trans youth are abusing them by helping them transition to the gender with which they relate, as well as this sudden upsurge in transphobia that I've been noticing from a lot of conservative spheres as well as liberal ones. The framing of trans people as predators and of trans youth parents as abusers is seriously concerning, and I think it's super hypocritical that these people are claiming to care about children and the safety of women when in reality these are the same people that don't give a fuck about that most times. If they care about children's safety, gender affirmative treatment actually helps reduce rates of youth wanting to hurt themselves, so that doesn't make any sense. So that's why today's fundraiser is dedicated to helping transgender individuals whose mental health is suffering during this time. It's so important to provide support to them. I have friends and clients who are transgender, and I can only imagine how hurtful it must be to be suddenly receiving this upsurge in backlash for just the person that you identify as being. So if this is a cause that's also important to you and you have the ability to make a donation, please do so below. It's really simple, just a few clicks, takes like 10 seconds. Our goal for this month is $700, and every little bit goes a really long way because these hotline crisis workers are usually volunteers, and so they're not getting paid for this, and the funds have to come from somewhere. So thank you so much for that, and let's just go into the 10 ways that your thoughts are sabotaging your mental health. Number 1 is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is when you assume the worst case scenario is going to happen to you. So for example, you experience turbulences on a plane, thinking, oh, this is going to be the 1 in 11 million time that a plane gets ruined by turbulences and is going to crash and the pilots won't be able to save it. Or thinking that your partner not replying to your text for an hour means he must be with another girl, he must be cheating, or maybe he got into a car accident and he's in the hospital right now. Catastrophizing is very common in anxiety disorders, depression, especially depression that's associated with like hopelessness and abandonment issues, among other things as well. I do have a whole video on helping you manage catastrophization, so I will put a link for that up here. Check that out if this is something you feel like you do quite a bit. Just a challenge that I have for you if you do tend to catastrophize. The worst case scenario is rarely ever the most likely thing to happen. Oftentimes, the midpoint between the worst case scenario and the best case scenario is the most likely scenario of happening. In some circumstances, it might lean more towards one or the other, but in most cases, it's the midpoint. So try to think, what is the worst case scenario, but what is the best case scenario, and what is that midpoint between them? Operate as if that midpoint is what's actually most realistic. The second way that your thoughts are sabotaging your mental health is all or nothing or black and white thinking. This can sound kind of like either I'm the best in class or I'm a failure, either I'm the most attractive person in the room or I'm ugly, either I eat no cake or I binge on cake until I'm sick, either someone is the best person in the world or they're the worst person in the world. This is essentially when you go from idealizing someone to devaluing someone, and then on a larger scale, putting people into categories of idealized versus devalued is a defense mechanism known as splitting. Very common in borderline personality disorder as well as narcissistic personality disorder. So like I said, this type of distortion is something we see a lot in personality disorders, particularly cluster B, as well as anxiety disorders, eating disorders, perfectionism, and others. Dialectics is really important here. Dialectics is the whole mechanism behind which dialectical behavioral therapy was created. It's all about seeing that two polar opposites can coexist, and instead of living in the all white or all black, living in the gray. And it doesn't have to be so extreme, usually it's somewhere in the middle. It's not just this extreme thing is happening and this extreme thing is happening and they're both happening at the same time. It can also be that actually the truth is not that extreme in the first place. So a challenge here is, instead of framing things as either or, like either I'm this or I'm the polar opposite, try X and Y. For instance, I'm not the best in my class, and I'm still a good student. This person hurt me, and they're still a human being deserving of my empathy. I told myself I wasn't gonna have any cake today, and I decided to have a slice. Now, the third way that your thoughts are sabotaging your mental health is through emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is like, because this feels true, because I'm feeling this emotion, it must be true. There must be a reason why I'm feeling this way. So for example, because I feel guilty for saying no to a family member, then I must be doing something that warrants me feeling guilty. When in reality, as we know, a lot of times with things like emotional blackmail, when you feel guilty, it's not necessarily because you did something wrong. Or if I feel angry, this person must have done something wrong. Or if I feel scared, it must be because this situation is dangerous. This is found commonly, I think, in people who haven't quite learned the skills of emotional intelligence yet. I do have a recent video on this as well. In reality, emotions can sometimes inform us about what's going on. Like, sure, if you were feeling scared, that might be because you're catching on to some threat signals and it is a potentially dangerous situation, but it's not always the case. Sometimes as human beings, we feel an emotion in situations where it's not actually adaptive to feel it. So we get scared when someone's showing us kindness, we feel guilty when we haven't done anything wrong, we feel angry because of our own personal insecurities rather than someone being unfair to us, etc. So in each situation, we have to kind of assess, does this emotion make sense right now based on the circumstances? Every emotion is associated with a specific trigger, like anger with being threatened or unjustly treated, fear with danger, and so on. Before assuming that an emotional experience reflects a truth about our circumstances, we have to first stop and look at the evidence. So the challenge here is I encourage you to, when you feel an emotion, check in with yourself and ask yourself, does it make sense to feel this emotion based on the facts of the situation? And if not, then don't take it as fact. Now, number 4 is attribution bias. This kind of has two parts. So one is that we assume when good things happen to us, it's because we earned it. And then we assume when another person does something bad, it's because they are intrinsically bad as a person. Or when something good happens to someone else, we assume it's because of external factors rather than who they are as a person or hard work or so forth. So when you're driving and you cut someone off, let's say you're just not feeling it that day, you cut them off. You might think, yeah, I guess that was kind of a mean thing to do, but I'm in a rush to get to work. I didn't mean to be an asshole. I wasn't paying attention. Versus when someone else cuts you off in traffic, you might start cursing them out, go into road rage, like, how could they do this? They're just a jerk. Like, this is because they are a jerk as a person, as opposed to me. I have all these extrinsic reasons why I did what I did. Let's take another example. Let's say that when you get an A in Spanish class, you assume it's because I studied really hard, I'm really talented at languages, I'm just a great student, versus when someone else gets a really good grade in Spanish. Oh, that's just because their dad is from Mexico. They just have an unfair advantage. Maybe without considering, well, actually, they haven't spoken to their dad in like 10 years, so that's probably not it. This is a phenomenon that I would say is more prevalent in people with narcissistic tendencies. Feel the need to protect their self-image, so they bolster themselves up and they tear other people down. It's not really something you would see with someone with low self-esteem who's constantly putting themselves down. But to an extent, it's a bias we all use. So don't think that if you relate to it, you're necessarily a narcissist. That is not how it works. This is not one of the criteria to determine if someone's a narcissist. So a challenge I have for this one, when something good or bad happens to either you or someone else, think about all the internal and external variables that may have caused the outcome. So for example, like I always say, I feel like I've had a lot of privilege to be able to go into a doctoral program. I was blessed to go to good schools growing up. My parents' hard work paid off when we moved to the US. Their attitude on hard work rubbed off on me. And also I'm aware that I'm a very hard worker and I am naturally smart. So all these things, internal and external, have helped shape my circumstance. But if your friend is being cold, yes, they have a tendency to shut down when they're mad. They have a trauma history that makes them do this. And the past semester has been really hard for them. It's both internal and external things that are affecting why they're behaving this way right now. Number 5, jumping to conclusions. This one also has 2 types. So mind reading and fortune telling are 2 subtypes of jumping to conclusions. Mind reading is when basically you're saying, I can accurately deduce what someone else is thinking. So for example, if someone is mad, it's because they hate me. I just know it. It's because they hate me. Or fortune telling, like, I know what's going to happen. Like when a parent says to their kid, if you get a piercing, it's going to get infected and it's going to look bad and you're going to regret it. And I know that this is going to happen. This is again seen in more narcissistic folks because it tends to reflect a lack of empathy. It assumes that you know what will happen or what someone else is thinking better than they do when really you don't quite have an idea. It's also seen in people with anxiety when it has a catastrophizing flavor to it, like if I do this thing, the worst case scenario is going to happen. It can also be seen in someone with more magical thinking or psychosis, but that would be on a more extreme end. Like I can literally hear what people are thinking, I can literally predict the future. And we're not talking about like spiritual practices here, we're talking about people who actually have a psychotic disorder. So the challenge here is state the facts without embellishing it by adding any assumptions. So for example, I can see you're crossing your arms and glaring at me. This makes me wonder if you're mad at me. Or if you get a piercing, there's a small chance that it might get infected. I worry that you will be really sad if that happens. Number 7 is negative filtering. And this is when you discount the positive and augment the negative in any situation. For example, at a restaurant, when the server says they don't have the meal that you wanted and they bring you your second choice, instead of saying, oh, I actually really like this, or I'm really grateful to be able to afford a meal at a nice restaurant, to be here with loved ones, I get to eat tasty food, you simply say, I can't believe this place, God, do restaurants have any good service these days? I really wanted that meal. Another common one people will say is nobody likes me, I have no friends, and then dismiss the friendships that they clearly have, the people who clearly do care about them. It's also common for people experiencing depression, people with vulnerable narcissism, people with anxiety disorders. And the challenge here is gratitude journaling, always looking at the glass half full. I know that this might sound a little bit like toxic positivity, like, well, just look at the bright side of things. To be honest, the people who are the happiest are the ones who savor every experience, even seemingly small ones that wouldn't make another person so happy. Like my grandma always says, I can find happiness even in just a cup of coffee. The simple things, the little things in life, those should be the ones that give you the most pleasure, as opposed to assuming, well, if this incredible thing doesn't happen to me, it's not worth seeing the good in life. Number 8, overgeneralizations. So this is just making sweeping statements that are bound to be untrue characterizations of the nuance that is required in order to be accurate when describing something. For example, bad things always happen to me, or global labeling of someone, like he's just a bad person. Corporations are just all evil. A common one in relationships is you always do this or you never do this. I think we all tend to be guilty of this in certain situations, but especially people who have a somewhat immature or surface level understanding of the world, or who are experiencing low insight because of affective reactivity in the moment. Like if you're feeling really angry, you might not be open to seeing the nuance in a situation. So the challenge here is don't use reductionistic or absolute language, because it's pretty much guaranteed to shoot you in the foot. Someone, when they hear you saying something really reductionistic, they're going to say, well, did you think about this exception? Like their mind is automatically going to go to all the times that you were wrong. And so use more nuanced adjectives or describe the situation in a neutral way instead. Like, oh wow, now this is the third relationship in a row where I've been cheated on, as opposed to saying everyone always cheats on me. Or instead of saying corporations are all evil, maybe saying corporations seem to be prone to abuses of power, or he seems like an antagonistic person from what I've observed, instead of just saying this guy is a piece of shit. Lean into the nuance, lean into the complexity, be descriptive instead of just slapping an overgeneralizing label on it. Number 9 is should statements. So letting arbitrary rules guide your life and worldview. Things like, I should be thin, I should be a lawyer, I should be in a relationship, I should have kids, or other people should give me special treatment. My friends should drop everything if I say that I'm in trouble. Everything should always run smoothly. As you can tell, there's a flavor to it that's more self-deprecating and a flavor that's more entitled. This one is common in people who were raised with highly controlling, authoritarian parents or very permissive parents. So people who either internalize the message that there are very strict and non-negotiable rules by which the world works, or people who were told that the rule is actually you should always get what you want. This type of distortion can be seen in eating disorders, OCD, and other anxiety disorders, perfectionism, narcissism, etc. Challenge yourself when you catch yourself thinking in a way that reflects a should belief. Ask yourself where it originated from. Is it an absolute truth that everyone could universally agree with? Or is it just something that was drilled into you from a very young age? Quit shoulding all over yourself. Number 10, personalization and blame. This last one is basically blaming yourself for something that you weren't responsible for, or blaming others while overlooking your own role in the issue. So this is another one of those that can kind of go into two separate directions. Either you can do no wrong or you do all the wrong. So for the first one, you can do no wrong. Everyone else is always to blame. Let's say that you blame everything that goes wrong with the project on your coworker, you blame someone else for a conflict that you played a role in causing. As you can imagine, this one can be seen in people with narcissistic tendencies. Now the second one, it was my fault that my child made a poor decision, I didn't raise them well enough, without saying that actually this is another person, they made their own decision, doesn't really have too much to do with me. Or if I hadn't gotten so drunk last night, I wouldn't have had my wallet stolen. You might be thinking like, okay, maybe the second one sounds true though. This is the fault responsibility fallacy. Like, just because something is your responsibility doesn't mean it's your fault. Like, if you got really drunk and lost your wallet, then sure, it's your fault that happened. It was your responsibility to take care of it. But if you got really drunk and someone else stole your wallet, that's that other person's fault. Like, they are the one that went out of their way to cause harm to someone else. It wasn't a natural consequence of your behavior. This type of self-blame is often associated with low self-esteem, trauma reactions like being emotionally abused in childhood, or more recent acute trauma, can be associated with worthlessness or guilt or depression, and so on. So the challenge with both types of this one is to look at all the factors that cause the outcome to be similar to a previous one that I mentioned. So thinking of all the different causal variables, including the things you did and the things that other people did or were just a part of the environment, instead of putting the blame all on yourself or all on anyone but yourself. So I think with all of these distortions, the first step is to become aware when it's happening, to start to kind of catch yourself as you notice these things happening. The second step is to then fix it while you catch yourself doing it, using all of the different challenges that I mentioned. Which one do you find that you use the most? I would love to hear that. And also, if you decide to donate to today's fundraiser, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and it goes a really long way. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.